Sierra Metals owns and operates 3 mines in Latin America, producing base and precious metals. Sierra has excellent resource growth potential and is well funded with a strong cash position and increasing cash flow. Sierra Metals.
Welcome to the C-Suite series on Channelchek. I'm Michael Kopinski, the Director of Research at Noble Capital Markets. Noble is the source of all equity research on Channelchek and the source for small and microcap companies. These are companies that may not be front and center on CNBC, but represent the heart of the North American economy. Of the 6,000 small and microcap companies listed on Channelchek, in this program, we are featuring Sierra Metals. Stock symbol is SMTS. Noble mining analyst Mark Reichman, a best on the street all-star analyst, is surveyed by the Wall Street Journal and by Forbes magazine, will interview the president and CEO of Sierra Metals. While metal prices have been somewhat depressed, what we would like to learn from this interview is how the company could benefit from a growing production profile. In addition, how can a growing demand for electric vehicles, solar, and wind support growth for this company? Before I turn it over to Mark, I encourage you to stick around for closing comments when Mark and I will discuss the key takeaways from this interview. And finally, if you'd like to get Mark's research on Sierra Metals, on channelchek.com, type in the ticker symbol SMTS in the search box in the top left section of the site. With that, take it away, Mark.
Thank you, Mike, and welcome, Luis. Luis, you recently joined the company and assumed the CEO role effective June 1st. Would you talk a little bit about your background and the opportunity you see in Sierra Metals?
Hi, Mark. Thanks for the interview. Yes, I'm a mining engineer. I worked in mines in Chile, Peru, Mexico, Canada for most of my career. I've had a long career with Anglo American, over 23 years, both in operations and projects. The last 13 in Peru, where I had the role of different intervals of project director for the Quellaveco project, for the Michiquillay project, and most of the time as country manager for Peru. So I've been through a different mix of experiences in the mining industry. How do I see Sierra? Why I've joined Sierra, which is a question that I've been asked a few times. I think Sierra is an exciting company. It has very interesting assets and very value accretive assets. It has this mix of operating assets with a quite interesting growth expectation. You know, as well as I guess our listeners, that being a jurisdiction with mining history, operating, creating cash flow, and having a prospect of growth is something that all companies look for, and Sierra has that. Sierra has that in its 3 assets, in Yauricocha, in Bolivar, and in Cusi, particularly in Yauricocha and Bolivar. Another thing I like Sierra is that it's in the right mix of commodities. In the first quarter, 40% of its revenues came from copper. I think many people, including myself, certainly are quite optimistic on where copper is heading. It's going to be a big part of the new economy in terms of demand and also of supply of energy. You can see on the wind energy and solar energy, it uses a lot of copper. 20% will come from zinc, which is an industrial metal that is widely used and is going to remain the same for the future. Silver has another 20%. Again, it's an option. It's got good price, and Sierra has the right ore bodies to get the silver at good cost and bring it to the market. And the rest is gold, which is 10%, and lead. Gold, as we know, has had a bit of a rally lately, and it's bringing good revenue to the company as we speak. So again, right jurisdictions, right ore bodies, and expectations to grow, and a very good management team, I should say, which is very strong.
What about the other members of your team, and how does their experience enhance the company's probability of success?
Well, we have a very experienced team, actually. Our managers, both in Peru and in Mexico, they have been in the industry for quite a while. They have run underground operations successfully in companies mid-size, even larger than Sierra. So they are. I'm very happy with them. The CFO, the technical are also quite strong. On the technical side, we have people that have been over 30 plus years in the industry, and they are very, very competent. So the team is quite good, and I met them before I joined. It's one of the things that I really liked about Sierra. So the company, from my point of view, has been delivering on what it said in the last few years, increasing resources, increasing the size of the operations, and building a strong team in order to be a growth story for the future, and also moving into the right commodities. Copper is going to be more and more of the mix in the future.
Well, last week, the company announced the discovery of a new high-grade silver zone at the QC mine. How does that improve QC's growth outlook?
Well, that's very exciting. Initially, the mine was exploring on the Santa Rosa fault, and initially the interpretation was that next to the Santa Rosa fault there were some stockworks, but then by drilling, what was apparent is that it wasn't a stockwork, but it was more a system of veins that would extend beyond the Santa Rosa fault to the other side. So in one area that geologically was thought to be barren, now we can tell that there is ore on the other side. Okay, so there was like a hard boundary on the resources from this fault to one side. Now we can tell that there is ore on the other side. We still have to drill more to see how deep or how high or how wide this system goes. But it's quite an exciting finding, and it will help us in the strategy for QC, which is to go to a higher throughput in the future.
Would you briefly comment on the company's efforts to increase its reserves and resources to support its growing production profile?
Yes, in Bolivar, we already have 40 million tons of resources. We still are looking at converting them into reserves, but we feel quite confident that that resource base gives us a space to grow. We're still working on it, but that's our next stage. In Yauricocha, same thing. We have over 7 years of resources at the moment, at 3,600 tons per day. We believe that there is more. We are searching and exploring within the mine deeper and within the ore bodies, but also around the current footprint of the mine. And QC, we just discussed it. The other thing that Sierra has, which is quite interesting, is that it has quite a nice land package nearby their operations. Okay, you have over 10,000 hectares on each of them that you can keep doing a bit of near mine exploration and eventually extend the size of the resource, which would support further growth. So we're looking into all of those variables to see what's the next stage in terms of growth, and also cost-wise, because the scale will give us a cost advantage and will allow us to optimize better our operations.
Could you talk a little bit about how the coronavirus has impacted your operations, and your thoughts on protecting the safety of your employees?
Well, the safety of our employees is paramount to us. That's first and foremost our focus. This COVID situation certainly it has been a challenge. Different in Peru than in Mexico. In Peru, we were allowed to keep with essential activities, so we kept a small crew on site. Part of the essential activities we had to keep mining and developing, otherwise we would have issues on the area. So that's what we did with a very small crew: keep mining, keep operating the plant for a bit. But that has been quite successful. We haven't had any cases, any major outburst of cases in the mine. We've had a few cases that appear and then they went into quarantine, but didn't affect the operation. And now since the government now has included mining as an activity that can be brought forward, we are ramping up carefully. Same thing in Mexico. We could keep operating because of the essential activities, but now we are ramping up to full production in Bolivar. In Cusi, it's a different story because Cusi is right in the middle of a small town. So there we have to be particularly careful on how we ramp up, because it's more difficult to isolate our operations from the general population. So it's going to take us a bit longer to do it. Now what we're doing is having very stringent protocols in both sides, following government guidelines and our own guidelines, which are a bit more stringent, to make sure that people is safe, people is healthy, and the communities around us as well. And that's what we're doing.
Well, now, how would you characterize the company's financial strength and liquidity?
It's good. We have quite a nice cash balance, and we are this year, even with COVID, we're aiming to be cash positive, to have some free cash flow at the end of the year. So we are doing well. Next year, in the second half, we have to start paying the loan we got with Banco de Crédito del Perú. But we feel that we have the right cash flow to honor that payment. Last year, the company announced a $30 million buyback program. Well, that's been suspended because of where we are now, but I think the strength of the cash flow will be back in the future, and we will be able to do something on returning funds to our shareholders.
Luis, of the metals that Sierra mines, which do you think have the most favorable long-term outlook?
Well, I like copper. I come from a copper background. I've been in copper for many years, and I'm very positive about the copper prospects. Copper has it's quite difficult to bring copper into the market. As we know, to bring these large open pit mines in different jurisdictions, it's very capital intensive, so that's quite difficult. Now, on the demand side, as we know, as I was mentioning, the new economy is going to bring more and more copper demand. I think Sierra is in a unique position because we are already establishing operations. Our capital intensity to grow is quite low. It's quite low. Although our cash cost might be higher, our capital intensity is lower. So we are in a sort of nice equation there. Now we have to make sure that we bring as much as we can to the market. Zinc, it's a steady industrial metal. I also like it. Silver as well. I think it's there. I think it should improve in price over time. It's going to be used also more in the new economy, both as industrial as precious. So I think we have a very nice mix for the average investor that wants to have a growth story for the future.
Well, to wrap up, What differentiates Sierra Metals from other mining companies, and why is now a good time to invest?
What differentiates Sierra? I think it has very good assets. It has company-making assets. You know, Yauricocha, Bolivar, Cusi are three strong assets, large land packages. It has been very consistent in follow its strategy of growth. It has improved its resource base and grown its resource base. It has a very strong management team, so it's going up. That's my sense. So I think that differentiates from other companies, that the opportunities are there and we can make them happen.
Well, thank you, Luis, for your helpful insights.
Thank you, Mark. It's very nice talking to you.
Mark, thanks for bringing this mining company to us. I really appreciate that. A couple of quick questions and some takeaways. You know, we talked a little bit about copper and the significance of the new economy. It seems like we're evolving into that new economy with battery-powered vehicles and solar and wind. How far in the future do you think it will take before we start seeing a recovery in copper prices?
Well, you know, obviously the current macro environment is a headwind for base metals prices, including copper, but longer term, the outlook for base metals is much stronger. And so I think this is probably a couple years, the whole demand should improve, within, like, say, the next 5 years. And that's really predominantly driven by, demand for, electric vehicles, the growth there. Obviously, there's this whole theme of electrification, and copper plays a role in charging stations and, other green technologies, frankly. So we think that the long-term outlook is particularly good for copper. And with the weakness in the price over the last year, obviously metals companies haven't been in a big rush, to bring a lot of new supplies to the market. So we think that there could be a tightening in the supply-demand balance, which would be helpful, for copper prices. In fact, even some of the majors like Barrick and others, have made mention that they're, interested in copper deals. And so I think you have some of the majors already, looking at the supply-demand balances and figuring out that, we need to start positioning ourselves today, for what looks like a very constructive long-term demand outlook.
I'm not going to try and pronounce some of these mining names, but recently they found silver, I guess. Maybe you can explain a little bit about that and whether or not that was included in your model and your outlook, because it seemed like that was a little bit of a positive surprise.
Yes, the QC mine is a silver mine in Mexico, and it has been somewhat of a laggard. For one thing, it was relatively small. They had, plans to increase the production to 1,200 tons per day. But just given the fact that it was a little higher cost and they were a little slow in the development, it just really hasn't, it's been really the kind of a laggard in their portfolio. And so when the COVID-19, hit, and there were work restrictions placed in Mexico and Peru, and the company put its mines on care and maintenance. Well, QC remained even after work restrictions had been lifted, and I think there was some question as to whether they would even bring it back into production this year and instead focus on mine development. Well, last week they did announce a new silver discovery at the QC mine, much significantly higher grades. And I think importantly, they announced that they would be resuming production at QC in the third quarter, trying to bring production up to about 1,200 tons per day by the end of the year. But this new discovery, what it really does significantly enhance the growth outlook for QC. One, because with those new resources and as they develop those, they should be able to, increase production capacity at QC even higher than 1,200 tons per day, even up to 2,400 tons per day potentially. And you would see greater profitability and lower unit costs, just not only based on the higher production rate, but also based on higher grades of silver. So that was, a real positive announcement for the company. Within its portfolio, obviously Louise in the interview said that, production is going to be more weighted towards copper, in the future. And, the Bolivar mine in Mexico is predominantly copper. Yuricocha is polymetallic. And then, of course, you've got QC, which is silver. So, looking out, there's a lot of optionality with QC. If in fact if they down the road, this is just kind of pure speculation, they really wanted to focus on, the base metals, then potentially, with QC's long-term growth outlook improving, there could be the potential to even sell that mine down the road. But it's probably early days to be talking about that right now.
Gotcha. Well, Mark, thanks for bringing Luis to us. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.